Some context and staying with that story, former President Kgalema Motlanthe has arrived at Champagne Valley in KwaZulu-Natal, where his foundation is hosting the Inclusive Growth Forum as part of Youth Month. Motlanthe says former presidents should use their privileged access to sitting presidents to be champions for the marginalized, like the youth. His foundation will engage thought leaders in response to President Cyril Ramaphosa's Thuma, Mina call. Nthakoana Ngatane joins us once again from Champagne Valley. Nthakoana, what is the latest at Champagne Valley today?
Good morning again, Desiree. Well, it's just a few hours before the actual event begins this afternoon here at Champagne Valley, and many names are expected to be part of this forum that has been organized, as you said, by the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation. And the core objective of this event really is to bring together young people and powerful minds of South Africa to look at the South Africa that we want and work towards it. But of course, joining me now is one of the people who we understand was instrumental in crafting the South Africa we have today and the Constitution in particular. He was Minister of Constitutional Affairs going into democracy and immediately after in the transitional administrations to democracy here in South Africa, and that is Mr. Rolf Meyer. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, you are at the end of the program, wrapping up what this forum should come out and say. What do you hope it should say?
Well, first of all, I think it's a learning experience for all of us, young and old, in discussing what the President asked us to do at the beginning of the year in the SONA address, when he said all of us as South Africans must come forward and put up our hand and say what we can do for the country. And I think that is very much the theme of this weekend's discussion. So it will be people, like you said, from all structures of society, civil society, business, as well as representatives from the political arena. And the whole idea, and what I would expect to be the outcome, is that we will take a message back and say, how are we going to deal with the crucial issues in South Africa? The most crucial one, in my mind, is how to address the inequality problem. And if we can't succeed in finding answers to that, South Africa will be a losing country. So it's very urgent, it's very necessary that we address our minds, and hopefully by Sunday we will be able to put up our hands and say to the government, to the President, here we are, we have some answers.
Let's talk about that inequality problem that you mentioned, and talking particularly about the issue of land, because some believe it's at the core of inequality in the country. Now, you were part of a forum again that dealt with land at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, but also some believe that you should be instrumental, as you were pre-1994, in working with President Cyril Ramaphosa to bring back the sort of mood or attitude towards finding a solution. Now, when you look at the Constitution in particular, particularly Section 25, former President Motlanthe says it's enough on its own. What is needed is implementation. What do you think?
I think former President Motlanthe is absolutely right in his assessment there. It's not the question of the Constitution that is the problem. I think it's a matter of implementation, and I think we have seen too little implementation with regard to land reform and land redistribution in the last 20 years or more. And the provisions, according to the Constitution, are there, as well as in terms of the Land Act, etc. It's a matter of implementing those. The result is that the government is sitting on a huge number of farms themselves. In other words, the government is the biggest farm owner in the country, if you wish. It's a question of how do we put that to the usage of people that are really entitled to be farmers, to own the land, and to be able to use the land for their own benefit. The whole question that you referred to about land as the core of the issues relating to closing the inequality gap, it's definitely part of it, but it's not the only part of it. In the minds, I think, of the vast majority of South Africans who are suffering, who are hungry, who are struggling with poverty, it's about the matter of unemployment. And so we have to look at how we can actually balance land with the implementation of good policies, but also with provision of of jobs, which is, I think, the most burning issue. And that can only happen if we have a growing economy. So it's a multiplicity of factors that have to come into mind. And I think what we need to do, and that is part of the exercise this weekend, is to identify the priorities. Where can we all make the contribution that can prioritize the key issues and focus on them in order to help the people of South Africa getting a better life.
But of course, if one looks at an area like Champagne Valley where we are now, this is an area that shows those disparities in terms of inequality. You see people who are white and previously privileged owning land and employing from largely what we've seen, black people. So how do we close that gap if we're not going to be radical in terms of changing our approach?
Yeah. I think we have to be radical. You're absolutely right. The question is, how do we find the right formulas and the right policies to make that happen? Do we exchange land ownership, or do we bring in new participants, fellow South Africans who can be co-owners, partners in bringing about the usage of land to the best benefit of all? I mean, this property right where we are standing now employs not less than 350 people. That in itself is a huge contribution to the benefit of the area. The question is, where does the real benefit lie? In terms of the workforce just receiving their remuneration, or do we actually look at them as part of the outcome? In other words, do we share also the profits with them? And I think that is the kind of discussion that we have to engage in.
Now, let's talk about young people. We know that statistics show us that 50% of them are unemployed. Of the unemployed population in the country, 70% are young people. Of course, you'll be engaging with them here today. Some will present their cases. But where do we go?
I think ideally we should say, if we can provide a growing economy that can look after everybody under the age of 40, in other words, with job or employment opportunities. In other words, that every South African under the age of 40 is engaged in some opportunity where he or she can make a living from. Then we have reached the ideal. The older generation should look after themselves, we can almost say, or we can provide them with grants and so on and so on. But I think the starting point has to be the young people of South Africa, and if we can provide them with jobs, that would be the ideal starting point.
Thank you very much. Roof Meyer is here at Champagne Valley, and he will be part of those minds that will engage with the youth. And part of discussions here will be strengthening the state of South Africa post-state capture. And we have many, many people who will engage, invited by the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation. Back to you in studio.
Thank you very much there to Nthakoana Ngatane.